My dudes, today I'm going to be giving you a preview of my Hearthstone workshop. This is just one of the cards that I have in there, and we're just going to cover composition, but I thought this would be very valuable for you to get an idea of how a Hearthstone artist gets their assignment, what's expected of them, and how I go about laying out and sketching out the beginning stages of a Hearthstone card. Let's get to it, man! Okay, so step one, the goal is to create 3 thumbnails. These 3 thumbnails are going to give them a variety of options. We don't want to invest more than about 20 to 30 minutes into creating our 3 thumbnails. So we've got our description, and we just want to do these quick little doodles to make sure that they fit within the template. So we pull up a minion template from Hearthstone, and we're going to create 3 of these matching the ellipse exactly. Be sure, by the way, to do the full rectangle because sometimes they cut these images out and then they're going to put them in like art books or in marketing materials. And we know that we're going to be drawing Runthak here, so we need to go to wowhead.com, and basically this is a model viewer, really helpful for taking some screenshots and just getting the kind of reference, whatever you need. You can change the pose, you can change the animation, and just do some still shots to grab a nice collection of reference material of our key subject here. When I've got all my screenshots of the character at the angles that I might want, like anything that shows the side of the arm or the side of the head, anything that I might need, I want to have like a sense of the breakdown of what the character looks like. I keep all that on like one layer, and then background stuff I usually keep somewhat separately. That way I could be referencing it directly. It's on a transparency layer so that I can be drawing on my layer beneath it while I'm looking directly at, the reference off to the side. This is just how I do it. Some people set it up with multiple windows in their Photoshop, but this is just the way I like to do it so that I can color dab from the reference imagery and then just paint it into my layer beneath. So we got our description here. It says, to show this male orc warrior looking angry and wielding a whirlwind axe as he stands proudly in Orgrimmar on an incline above a crowd of citizens. Tough thing for a tiny little card to squeeze all that in. With Hearthstone cards, they have to read very small because some people play these on mobile phones, so you can't have like a tiny little character like this standing with like a massive detailed city going on in the background. You want to make sure that you think of it almost like an icon. When in doubt, simplicity rules. Focus on the one main character that's going to fill 70% of your ellipse. All right, so now this is when all that figure drawing that you've been doing really comes in handy because you want to get a quick gesture of the layout of the body fitting into this elliptical template. I'm keeping in mind he's flexing. This dude is standing proudly in Orgrimmar. If you decide like maybe that arm should come out a little bit further or something, you can make a selection and then use the Command T function to use a transform to rotate it. Because ultimately we're just aiming for a silhouette here. We just want to get 3 silhouettes that look kind of like they encapsulate the description that they've provided. In the planning stage, use whatever dirty tricks you can use to get your composition correct. Some people will model this stuff out, but in this case, they provided, like a render of the Whirlwind Battle Axe, which I used, by the way, all the way up to level 75. And I'll just drop it in. I'll use the transform tool to just drop that into my composition and see if I can make it work to fit with the character that I had been sketching out. You really have to separate in your mind the composition phase from the final rendering phase. Way too often people will jump right into like going, well, it doesn't look rad yet. Well, no, of course not, because you're building the construction of your scene in your composition stage. Do the planning before you start to invest a ton of time into things. Once you've got an idea of your pose, you should fill it in with a silhouette to get a nice note-hand read. That's basically, we're going to have a black and white image that's going to have a strong readability in its composition before we go and add multiple levels in between. Most of my thumbnails only have like 3 levels of from black to light gray. So I build out my sketches in about maybe 20 or 30 minutes, doing just grayscale silhouettes. And if we look at our value scale here, we'll see that the farthest back is white or light gray right here. And then the middle ground kind of falls like between this range right through here. And then the foreground range is these people in the crowd, which is going to be the people down here, which is going to be your darkest value. Of course, our 3 options are very similar in that they are the same description, but they are slightly different in that the composition is different and how the character fits together into the shot. They may very well decide this is too complicated of a shot or too complex, or they may decide that a shot like this, they already have enough menacing looking orcs in their game. You never know, but I don't like to give them more than 3 different options. I'm going to keep noodling away on these until that they feel like they each have a very distinct identity. I don't go into designing out the armor or like getting all the details of everything in there. I'm mostly looking for things like, character flow and like tangents. You don't want objects to be touching other objects unless if they're controlling the flow. I want to make sure that, this looks like his boot, is up on a foreshortened kind of a thing here. Just overall, like making sure that the body reads clearly so that you can tell who's who and who's doing what, basically. You want to keep referring back to that text description because if anything is off from that, it doesn't matter how awesome it is. If it doesn't match the description they gave you, it is useless. So I need to really make sure that I'm selling the Orgrimmar in the background. That was the first thing that I noticed I really got to add. So I'm dropping in some of those spiky rooftop shapes and some of the palm trees that you see. And then I'm going through the previous iterations of the thumbnails that I had done, like the number 2 here, where I'm just adding a little bit of more definition so you can really see that he's wearing the armor. And I'm just making sure that the angles are there. You get a sense of like the flow, and I kind of envisioned a nice silhouette of the flowing robes or a torn up cloth kind of hanging off of his waist. Now with Hearthstone cards, they do give you a little bit of wiggle room to like kind of exaggerate some elements. Like Runthak does not have a torn up loincloth or, robes or anything, but it really kind of sold this warrior image, mighty warrior kind of an image. And it had a kind of a feel to it that I was pretty sure I want this feel of his like hair, tuft of hair flowing in the wind and things like that. Also, some of the Runthak reference imagery is inconsistent. Sometimes he has like the knotted goatee and sometimes he has a beard. So I was like, well, hell, I'll try a couple of different variations on this. And then for the first one, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to revisit that and flip it so that I can get a really different take on the same content. This is still supporting the description that was given to me, but I'm stretching it a little bit, just a little bit, while still sticking to the presentation. Most importantly of all of this, remember that it's got to fit within that template. And if you break out of that template, forget it. They're not even going to pick that one. They're going to be like, what are you doing? Ain't nobody going to change their template to meet your one cool drawings needs. Mm-mm. All right, so these are the 3 sketches, thumbnails that I've provided. Again, I spent about a total of 30 minutes doing all 3 of these. Remember to number them. And also make sure that the file name also has the name of the card that they give you. This is very important for them to stay organized. And you'll notice that there's some consistencies. I thought for sure that they would reject this one because of its complexity. When you look at other Hearthstone cards, it's like they tend to be very simple and it's just focused on one character. Note that almost everything outside of the character has to be very simple, and I've just silhouetted it. And if we look at all that reference for Orgrimmar, it's really just going to be the shapes of the buildings. Here, the thing that's missing is like we don't have this crowd, so I think that that's part of what really is going to sell this one here. And I kind of expect that they'll pick this one, but for the time being, it's like, well, I want to present a few different options. Notice that I flipped this one entirely just in case if they wanted to have the axe off to the side, but still have that kind of champion, arm in the air, like he's really celebrating a victory here. Note that if we turn on our template here, when they take this artwork and they put it into the game, it's going to fit nicely within that ellipse, and we'll still just get like a hint of some of the crowd here below, but the focal point, the majority of the image is still this. We still have some like nice flow with this triangle. There's good flow with things like the shape of the buildings behind him. Probably want to do something like this with the silhouette so that we can really frame this character nicely, with this kind of coming through like this, and then the highest point of contrast behind him, behind his face. So maybe even have some like light, some orange light when we look at all of our reference for Orgrimmar. It's like, very orange, very warm colors. And then maybe we could have some like cool colors going down here. And I'm already starting to think about that, cool foreground, warm background kind of a setting to really make it feel like Orgrimmar. Also note that we have a lot of arrows just in terms of the shapes of silhouettes and things that are pointing at the character. So if your eye like starts down here, it's going to flow up this arm and like kind of point at him. You've got a lot of things pointing to the axe and pointing to his face, especially if we get that nice contrast when we go to color contrast and value contrast behind Runthak's face here. We will probably not get to see too much of his face itself, but otherwise, we've got a lot of things that are nice pointed shapes that are pointing us back around to get a good flow throughout the piece. What you don't want is things that are constantly disrupting your flow, or objects that are facing away or pointing the viewer's eye off of the page. So for instance, if every one of these arms was like doing something like this, and they were kind of going willy-nilly and like weird directions and not really creating any flow to it. Like I do it almost instinctively because the problem is like this ends up pulling your eye in so many different directions. And what you want to do is kind of have your silhouettes and your shapes creating a nice flow to the whole piece that kind of point to your focal point of what the important information in your image is. And that's what I'm going to be thinking a lot about when I go into the final with it. Or at least as I go into the next stages, which are basically just going to be the color rough stages of whichever one of these that they pick. But again, my money's on this one. I think I know their taste by now, and I'm pretty sure that's where they're going to go with it. But you still have to kind of give them options. And I haven't invested a ton of time in it, so like it's going to work out. So again, about 30 minutes in, and I'm going to call the thumbnails done. So for now, that's where we're at. So that's pretty much a real-time take at like how I go about setting up the canvas and starting out the sketch for a Hearthstone card. In parts 2 and 3, you'll see how I go all the way to rendering and the final polish. And also, as a bonus, this is just add-on. If you already got the Hearthstone Workshop, then you're going to get this for free. And as you can guess, I've been adding to this for like 4 or 5 years. So there's like 20 hours or something in this Hearthstone Workshop, including some real-time videos from old videos. Like before I even started teaching how I do what I do, I just captured everything. And so like you can see some of those early Hearthstone cards from before the game was even released. I've done over 80 Hearthstone cards and TCG cards for Warcraft. So, and if you're thinking you want to do Hearthstone illustration for a profession or for a hobby, like why would you not have this? Dudes, I reveal all of the secrets and all of the process of how we go about doing it. And dudes, of course, here on my YouTube channel, I give tutorials like this all the time, and I also answer a lot of questions. So my channel is the #1 resource for artists who want to work in the video game industry. So please do remember to subscribe. And until next time, I'll catch y'all. Manyan Daban. Ciao, baby. Oh, yeah.